James appeared to be the ideal husband, handsome, successful, and attentive. To the outside world, he had everything: a beautiful wife, Clara, and a thriving career in real estate. Clara adored him, often boasting about how lucky she was to marry such a loving and devoted man. Little did she know her picture-perfect life was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. James had a secret, a dark, dangerous one. For the past 6 months he had been seeing another woman, Lisa, a mysterious and alluring bartender he had met at a corporate event. Lisa was everything Clara wasn't: daring, unpredictable, and thrilling. For James, the affair was just an escape, a way to break free from the monotony of married life. But for Lisa, it was much more. She believed she was James's true love, the woman who would soon replace Clara in his life. As James juggled both relationships, he became a master manipulator. He would spend weekday mornings with Clara, sharing coffee and planning their future, only to sneak off to meet Lisa in the afternoons, whispering promises of a life they'd soon build together. Each woman believed she was the center of James's world, but cracks in his carefully woven web of lies were beginning to show. One evening, Clara stumbled upon something that made her pause: a text message on James's phone from an unsaved number. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Missing you already." Her heart skipped a beat. James had always been attentive, but recently, he seemed distant, distracted. Dismissing it as a misunderstanding, she decided not to confront him. Yet. Meanwhile, Lisa grew impatient. She was tired of being the secret. "When are you going to tell her?" she demanded during one of their clandestine meetings. James, ever the smooth talker, assured her, "Soon, babe. I just need the timing to be right. Trust me." But Lisa's trust was wearing thin. Unbeknownst to James, Lisa had started to follow him. She needed proof, evidence that she wasn't just another fling, that his promises to leave Clara weren't empty. What she discovered during one of her secretive investigations would be the catalyst for the chaos that was about to unfold. James's double life was beginning to take its toll. The constant lying, sneaking around, and managing two women with entirely different personalities left him on edge. Clara, ever the observant wife, started noticing subtle changes. James would come home later than usual, often distracted and lost in thought. The man who once showered her with compliments now seemed distant, his phone always clutched in his hand or face down on the table. One evening, while James was in the shower, Clara's curiosity got the better of her. She picked up his phone, her hands trembling. The same unsaved number flashed on the screen again, accompanied by a new message. "Don't forget what you promised me. I can't wait anymore." The words pierced her like a dagger. Who was this person, and what had James promised? Meanwhile, Lisa grew bolder. Tired of James's excuses, she decided to confront him during one of his work meetings. She walked into the upscale cafe where James often conducted his business dealings and found him laughing with a client. When their eyes met, James froze. His face turned pale as Lisa strode confidently toward him. "James, we need to talk," she said firmly, ignoring the shocked expression of the client sitting across from him. James quickly ushered her outside, his voice a harsh whisper. "What are you doing here? You can't just show up like this." But Lisa wasn't backing down. "I'm done with your games. Either you tell her, or I will." James knew he was running out of time. The cracks in his facade were widening, and the two worlds he had carefully kept separate were beginning to collide. He tried to calm Lisa, promising her that he would leave Clara soon. But Lisa wasn't convinced. She was tired of being the other woman and wanted James to prove his love for her. Back at home, Clara couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong. She began piecing together little details: the late-night work calls, the unexplained charges on their credit card, and now the messages. Deciding it was time to take matters into her own hands, she hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. What Clara didn't know was that Lisa, too, had started her own investigation. She wanted to see how serious James was about leaving his wife. Both women, unaware of each other's actions, were inching closer to uncovering James's deceit. As the walls closed in, James tried to maintain control, but one fateful mistake was about to unravel everything, sending his carefully constructed world into chaos. It was a Thursday evening when everything finally came crashing down. Clara had spent the entire day in a haze, her mind racing with thoughts of James's recent behavior. The private investigator had sent over the preliminary report, confirming her worst fears. James was having an affair. The details were enough to make her stomach churn: late-night meetings, expensive dinners, and secret rendezvous at hotels. But the investigator had uncovered something even more shocking. James had been seeing someone else for over 6 months. His lies ran deeper than she could have imagined. Clara sat in their living room staring at the report in disbelief. Her hands shook as she replayed the details in her mind. She had always trusted James, believed in the man he had shown her, the man who had promised to love her forever. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. But just as she was about to confront him, she heard a knock at the door. It was the last person she expected to see, Lisa. Her heart raced as she opened the door, trying to mask the shock on her face. "I know what you're going through," Lisa said, her voice trembling slightly, "but I have a right to know the truth just like you." Clara's mind spun. You're the other woman?" she managed to ask, barely able to keep her composure. Lisa nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and frustration. "I've been in this for months, and I'm done being lied to. I don't want him to keep playing both of us." Clara felt a wave of anger rise in her chest. "So you just show up at my door knowing everything?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa took a deep breath and nodded. "I couldn't keep living in the dark. I thought I was the one he truly wanted, but now I realize I was just his escape. And so were you. We both were." Clara's mind raced. She felt her world spinning as the truth sank in. James had been playing them both, using them to feed his desires and ego. But what hurt the most was the realization that he hadn't just betrayed her trust. He had manipulated her, lied to her face, all while pretending to be the devoted husband. In that moment, Clara knew that things could never go back to the way they were. The woman who had once loved James with all her heart was gone. But now, with Lisa standing before her, Clara had to make a choice. Should she confront James now, knowing the truth, or should she wait for him to come clean? As the minutes ticked by, the weight of the decision hung heavily in the air. But fate had other plans. James arrived home later that evening, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside his house. He walked in with his usual charming smile, ready to deliver yet another excuse for his late-night return. But as he stepped into the living room, his smile faded. Clara sat on the couch, her expression cold and unreadable. Sitting next to her was Lisa, her arms crossed, staring daggers at him. The color drained from James's face. What's going on here?" he stammered, glancing nervously between the two women. "Sit down, James," Clara said, her voice calm but laced with an icy edge. "We need to talk." He hesitated, his mind racing for an escape route, but there was no way out. Slowly he sat down, his palms sweating. "I know everything," Clara began, holding up the investigator's report. "The late nights, the secret meetings, the promises you've been making to her." She gestured toward Lisa, who was glaring at him with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "How could you do this to me, to us?" James opened his mouth to speak, but Lisa cut him off. "Don't bother lying, James. We both know you've been playing us. You told me you were leaving her. You told me I was the one you wanted." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Was any of it real, James? Or was I just some convenience while you went off to chase your little thrill?" James buried his face in his hands, unable to meet their gazes. "I never meant for it to get this far," he mumbled. "I was confused. I didn't want to hurt either of you." "Confused?" Lisa snapped, her voice rising. "You weren't confused when you were making promises to me. You weren't confused when you looked me in the eyes and told me I was the only one who mattered." Clara stood up, her voice trembling but firm. "You didn't just betray me, James. You made me doubt myself. You made me question everything we had, and for what? Your selfishness?" James finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Clara, I'm sorry. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. I want to fix this." But before Clara could respond, Lisa laughed bitterly. "Fix this? There's no fixing this, James. You've destroyed everything. You've hurt both of us in ways you can't even begin to understand." The room was thick with tension, each word cutting deeper than the last. Clara's mind swirled with memories of their life together, their wedding day, the laughter, the promises of forever. And now, all of it was tainted. But just as James began to plead again, there was a knock at the door. All three of them froze, the sound slicing through the suffocating silence. "What now?" Clara muttered, her voice weary. She moved to open the door, her heart pounding. Standing there was a stranger, a man Clara had never seen before. He looked nervous, his eyes darting to James. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low. "It's about him." James's face turned ashen. "Who is this?" Clara demanded, looking between the two men. The stranger hesitated, then said the words that would change everything. "I'm here about the money he owes, and the threats I've received." Clara and Lisa stared at James, their expressions shifting from anger to confusion. "What is he talking about, James?" Clara demanded. James stammered, struggling to form a coherent response. But deep down, Clara knew the lies went deeper than she had ever imagined. The man at the door stepped forward, his face grim. "You've been running from your debts, haven't you, James?" he asked, locking eyes with him. James took a step back, the blood draining from his face. Clara could feel her heart pounding in her chest. "What is this? What debts? Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger and confusion. The stranger let out a heavy sigh before answering. "I'm Michael, and I've been trying to collect on a loan you took out. But that's not all." He hesitated, glancing at Lisa before continuing. "There's something else. Something much worse. James here hasn't just been playing with your heart, Clara. He's been involved in some serious illegal activity, and I'm not the only one after him." The weight of the words hit Clara like a ton of bricks. Her head spun as she tried to process what she was hearing. "What do you mean, illegal activity?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael sighed deeply and glanced at James one last time. "You need to ask him about the business deals he's been making on the side. Deals that involve people you don't want to cross. Money laundering. Fraud. He's in deep with some very dangerous people, and I'm not the only one looking for him." Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. She had no idea the man she had trusted with her life was involved in something so dark. You've been lying to me about this too?" she whispered, her heart breaking with every word. James stood frozen, his back against the wall as Lisa looked on, her expression a mix of shock and betrayal. "You never told me any of this, James. You never said a word about what you've been doing behind my back," Lisa spat, her voice full of disgust. "I never wanted you involved in this. I never wanted anyone to know," James stammered, trying to explain himself, but the weight of his lies had finally caught up to him. Clara, unable to hold back her tears any longer, looked at him one last time. "You've ruined everything, James. Not just us, but my life, my trust. I don't even know who you are anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael stepped back, sensing the finality of the moment. "This isn't just about affairs or broken promises, Clara. This is much bigger than you think. And if I were you, I'd start thinking about how far you want to go with this." Clara turned to Lisa, her voice soft. "What do we do now?" Lisa looked down, then met Clara's gaze. "We both walk away, before we get caught up in something we can't escape from. This isn't just about love anymore, it's about survival." With that, Clara finally turned her back on James. The man she had loved, the man who had promised her forever, was no longer someone she could recognize. His web of lies, affairs, and criminal activities had shattered everything they once shared. As Clara walked out of the room, Lisa following behind, James collapsed to his knees, his world finally crumbling. He had played both women, lied to everyone, and now the consequences were irreversible.